He has given me 10 minutes. Don't be surprised if it goes into an hour. No, seriously. I have a lot of stories from World War II. I went ashore in Normandy and served with General Patton during World War II. Went all through France and Germany and Austria. But sometime back, I speak to a lot of the schools, and sometime back, one of the students asked me a question: what is the biggest honor that you've ever had? And I've had a lot of honors in my 41-year career in the Army, and since I've retired in the past 35 years. And I had to think about that for a while, and I think the greatest honor that I ever had happened in Austria. I was part of a 7-man artillery observation team, and we were moving forward to join the infantry. And we were on a side road, and we came to 2 rail cars. And the 2 rail cars had just huge piles of rags on the outside. And when we investigated later, we found the rags contained the bodies of women and children, and even little babies, and they had been machine gunned as they got off of the cars. We left there in a bad state, and we went on up the road, but earlier we had smelled an awful odor in the air. Had no idea what it was, because we'd never heard of a concentration camp. But as we went on up the road further, we began to see hundreds of male bodies off in the woods. We got to a turn in the road, and we began to hear some voices. We thought we'd better go on foot. And we did, and we found a camp by the name of Gunskirchen Lager. It was not a large camp like most of them. It had about 850, that's a rough figure, of men and boys that were being used as slave labor. They were the families of the women and children we had found up the road. They were all Jewish, of course. The guards were still in the tower and on the gates. Well, there were only 7 of us, so 7 of us surrounded camp and eliminated all the guards. We put a vehicle through the main gate and gave the inmates all the food and all the C rations, K rations, if you want to call it food, and water that we had, and all the medical supplies that we had. They were very appreciative, of course. During we called back to division, and we finally got some doctors and supply people up to take care of them. Even after eating some of our K rations and C rations, some of them died because the food was actually too rich for them, and they were not used to it. I got acquainted with 2 young boys in that camp, and their names was Aaron and Simon. To this day, I don't know their last names. But Aaron and Simon were about 16 years old. And it was shortly after I got to know them that we had to go on. We still had a mission to go on, so we had to leave. And as we went on down the road, we came across the town of Gunskirchen. And the people in Gunskirchen swore up and down they didn't know that camp was there, but it was at least a quarter to a half a mile away. We smelled it 5 miles away, but they said that they didn't know it was there. But anyway, we stayed there in that town long enough for a supply truck to catch up with us and to resupply our food. I don't know, after the war, I wouldn't talk about a lot of stuff. Oh, they wanted me to tell this story. When we came back home, I came on a victory ship. I called it a bucket of bolts. And we came into New York Harbor, and I was so seasick I couldn't hardly move. And when they said, "There's the Statue of Liberty," I had to go up on deck, of course. We got up on deck, and fireboats were there with their hoses shooting the water in the air. Ferry boat came out called the Ruptured Duck. Ruptured Duck, if none of you know, we had a brass eagle lapel emblem that was given to us after the war, and we gave it the name of the Ruptured Duck. But the ferry boat was called the Ruptured Duck, but on the side of the ferry boat was a big sign, and it had Sullivan on it, and we had no idea what that meant. Thought, big name for a boat, you know. And we realized we had a Sergeant Sullivan with us. And we got him over to the rail, and he put the field glasses on and saw his mother at one end of that sign and his wife at the other end. It took 9 of us to keep him from going overboard. To go a little bit more about the camp, about 10, 11 years ago, my unit had a reunion at the Drawbridge Inn over in Northern Kentucky. And during the session of one of our meetings, 2 men walked in. We didn't recognize them, didn't know who they were, asked them to identify themselves. It was Aaron and Simon, the 2 young boys that I had met in the camp. Aaron is now a college professor in California. Simon has his business in New Jersey. It was such a big thrill to realize that here's 2 men now that were young boys back then that have come to this country and made a life for themselves, and we had something to do with that. Well, just recently, about a month and a half, 2 months ago, Sarah Weiss from the Holocaust Museum called me up. And she says, we have one of the survivors from that camp that's in town, and he's from Boston, and he would like to have dinner with you. And I went out to have dinner with him, I think, if I remember correct, Franz Haas. And he was a member, an inmate of that camp, and has since went, after he got out of the camp, went to Switzerland, went to a medical school, met his wife, got married. They're both doctors, and they live in Boston. Greatest honor I ever had was realizing I had a small part in that. And that's one of the proudest things that I ever did. Have I still got time? Go. Some time ago, my sister had a family reunion, and her son, my nephew, stood up and he says, I want everybody here, to tell a story that's something that they've done that nobody in the family knows about. Boy, that's a touchy situation. And I couldn't think of anything until I got up, my turn, and I said, well, you all know that I'm married. And my son was born while I was in France. And I got a cablegram in French, couldn't read it. But we celebrated with a can of Vienna sausage and a block of cheese. Had a big party. But I said, when the war ended, I was stationed in a little town called Bergheim. Are you signaling to me my time is up?
No. You're allowing your story, sir. You're here.
And I met a lady that did my laundry. And she would do my laundry for a package of cigarettes, a bar of soap, and a bar of candy. And the cigarettes, you could buy an egg with a cigarette. Money didn't have any value at all. You could get a loaf of bread with 2 cigarettes, and a pair of shoes with 2 packages of cigarettes. But this lady had 2 little daughters, and one of the daughters was trying to teach me German, and I'm trying to teach her English. And she would always call me Heinrich. I don't know how many Germans are here tonight, but I hate that word for Henry. And I would ignore her when she would come around, and she would pull on my pants leg and call, Heinrich, du haben Kaugummi? And I would ignore her until she would say it in English, and she'd say, Henry, do you have chewing gum? And everybody in my family heard about my girlfriend, and they said, you were married and you had a girlfriend over there? I said, sure. Her name was Lisa Lottie. She was 6 years old. I had one on tip of my tongue there and I forgot about it already. But, I know what it was. When the war had ended and when we were still there at Bergheim, I had the opportunity to go to Switzerland. And there was a group of about 8 or 10 of us that got a pass. We didn't have a whole lot to do in those days. The war was over. And we did a lot of traveling around Europe. And in Switzerland, we stayed at a little Swiss village up in the Alps. And one evening, our translator came to us and said the villagers want to invite you all to go out to the edge of the village and meet with the shepherds as they bring their flocks in for the safety of the evening. And we thought, well, that's a good idea. We go out there, and they're big bonfire, and they're singing old folk songs and telling stories, and our translator is doing an excellent job with us. But one of the songs they sang, I fell in love with. And I'd like to sing it for you if you don't mind. It was called The Cry of the Lost Sheep. And the translator taught it to me in Swiss. And then later on, I translated it into English. So I'll sing it in Swiss first, and then I'll sing it in English. And it goes something like this. Now, I don't have any backup, so I'll have to do it all by myself. But it's called The Cry of Lost Sheep, and it goes something like this. Bah! Now, in English, it goes something like this. Bah!
All right. Thank you, Sergeant Major. Great story. So when Tyler asked me to talk about honor, I clearly couldn't figure out one story to tell. So I decided to kind of tell a story of the patients I work with on a daily basis, because I'm a firm believer everything happens for a reason. So this kind of starts on the day I enlisted in the Marine Corps. It was back in 2001. I was thinking about enlisting, going active duty out of high school. My mom, she's a teacher, she talked me out of it. So I started going to college for a year. Get a call from the recruiter, and he's like, how about the reserves? So we decided that's a good option. This is September 2001. It was September 11th. I was in the recruiter's office before everything happened. As I sat there in the recruiter's office, we get a phone call, and then the recruiters are saying something's going down, so they turn on the little 6-inch black and white TV, and we watched everything go. Everything happened. And then as we're sitting there, the phone just keeps ringing off the hook. World War II veterans, Vietnam veterans, Korea veterans, all trying to call the recruiters, what can we do? And it was at that point, they were like, we got this, sir. You did your service. Now it's our time to do ours. So at that point, I was like, this is something I got to do. So next day, went down to the military entrance processing, signed the paperwork, and pretty much got ready to go to war. Finished that following year of school. Went to boot camp in that summer. Graduated boot camp, went to infantry school. And then after infantry school, I joined the Lima Company, 3rd Battalion, 25th Marines out of Columbus, Ohio, in late 2002. So from 2002 to end of 2004, we kept on edge the whole time. We're going to war, we're going to war. Finally, at the beginning of 2005, we got the call. So we decided to go out. Then they shipped us out to 29 Palms, California for 2 months of pre-deployment training. Then we deployed to Iraq, Haditha Dam in Al Anbar province. This is 2005 when things were getting really hairy out there before the big surge. For the first 2 months, things were okay. We bounced around the Haditha area, no real contact. Then we got the call for Operation Matador out on the Syrian border. The Syrian border at this time was unpatrolled. There was one Marine company out there, but at the Wild West, they really couldn't do nothing. So we were a big regimental operation, trying to stop the people coming from Syria infiltrating into Baghdad and all that, causing all the problems. So as we're waiting for the Army to build a pontoon bridge for hours upon hours, we started taking fire from a city not even on the map, on the mission. And our commander's like, well, we got to take this city. And it was at this time we sustained our first contact, and I got to see the honor of some of the finest Marines I've ever known go under fire and close with and destroy the enemy. In particular, Staff Sergeant Goodwin, he came to us once we got to Iraq. He was on his third or fourth tour already. True leader. As we're taking fire, we're all green. This is the first contact we've had. And we're searching house to house. And Staff Sergeant Goodwin, wearing his American flag bandana around his neck, walking down the street like John Wayne. And he's just directing traffic, bullets coming everywhere, cool as a cucumber. And it's like, as we look at him, it's like, he can do this, we can do this. And we got through that day to that last house. On that last house, we got some of our fire team got ambushed. A couple of my friends got shot. We were able to get them pulled out and medevaced, and took us the rest of the night to get in, try to clear the house. We went in multiple times, got repelled multiple times because they were barricaded on the floorboards of the house with automatic weapons and shooting arm-piercing rounds through our house. So every time we tried to go in, we get repelled. But we had Marines time after time going in, coming out wounded. And at a point, we shot 5 tank rounds into the house to no avail. So they were like, at this point, we had a Marine that was down. We couldn't get up, so that's one of the reasons we kept going in. And it was Staff Sergeant Goodwin, the guy who led us the whole day, the fierce leader. So it was like, we can't leave him back. So we kept going in and coming out. Then at that point, the higher-ups were like, we're going to drop a bomb in the house. And much to our chagrin, they kept pulling us back because we were trying to go in time after time to get them out. So we pull back. They go to drop the bomb. First one missed. Second was a dud. So the next day we go back and we have shoot a rocket into it, collapse the house, and we're finally able to get his body. So this was our first real casualties that day. We had Corporal Dirk and Staff Sergeant Goodwin passed away that day, and we had multiple other casualties. So they pulled us off the line, kind of let us regroup. Then the following day we were off, kind of doing a blocking position, kind of staying out off the line, just kind of so we can regroup. Then the day after that, May 11th, we were getting ready to leave the one city to head to the next city. Our Amtrak amphibious assault vehicle that the Marine Corps uses to patrol the desert, which is not the greatest thing in the world. But we were towards the back of the regimental convoy, and we were moving from that one town to the other. We stopped for a minute to drop off a mortar team and some reporters. Then we started up again. Then a couple minutes later, the world went black. We ran over an IED. Our vehicle, which weighed 38 tons, I heard, went anywhere from 3 to 4 feet in the air, and it was engulfed in flames. I was at that point, I believe the initial blast knocked me out. But for some reason that day, I decided to sit on the other side of the vehicle, because on the other side of the vehicle where I normally sit, all my friends passed away. So that's one reason I'm a firm believer things happen for a reason, because I was able to get out of the vehicle and have my fellow Marines run into the fire, literally, pull us out and get us to safety. After they saw that I was able to walk, they kind of put me around another vehicle and pointed me to go to the landing zone where the helicopters were coming in. I didn't think I was hurt that bad. I had third-degree burns, so they weren't all that painful at that point, and I was in shock. So I started walking back to the helicopter. I was awake, thinking I was going to be back with my guys in a couple days. I was waiting for the helicopter ride, then got to the aid station in Alkheim. They laid me down, checked my lungs, realized my lungs are pretty bad, and they put the tube in, and I was out for the next 9 days, and I woke up in San Antonio. And I was in the hospital for the next almost near month as an inpatient, recovering from surgeries and starting the therapy process. Then that's where I got the honor of getting to know some of the great therapists who kind of gave me my life back. At that point, I couldn't move I had like no function in my hands, but after about 1.5 years of intense therapy, I was able to eventually retire from the Marine Corps, and we pretty much get full function at that point. Actually, after I got out of the Marine Corps, I decided to give back a little bit to honor the people who kind of gave me my life back. So I decided to go to school, got my master's in occupational therapy, and I've been working at UC-MC for the past 4 years. So pretty much to this day, when I work with patients on a daily basis that are kind of down in the dumps and say, well, why is this happening to me? I can always I try to preach to them that things might happen, but everything kind of happens for a reason. If you kind of stay positive and stay motivated, you can get through this and get back to yourself.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much for sharing your stories. And thank you for being right on 10 minutes, both of you. You guys were rock stars. So if anybody has questions for Tyler, Sasquatch over there on the right-hand side, that's his call sign. I'm not being mean. You guys, you gave me a look like, what the heck? That's his call sign. So, but Sasquatch over here, he's got the mic. Please go over there and ask your questions, or I can run you a mic out as well. In the meantime, while you guys are thinking of your questions and heading over to Tyler, I had a question for Henry. Henry, if a sheep says baa, what does a cow say? Moo. Then what does the fox say? I can tell some of you have kids, because some of you got it, right? Some of you got it, right? Okay, yeah, yeah.
I said a fox standing next to a young lady will say, "What's your name?"
That's the best answer I've heard in a long time. All right, did anybody have any questions for these heroes? Back in the back there. I did start the clock for the 10-minute session. Just so you know, military time, gotta stay on, right?
I was just going to say thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. We appreciate your... Go ahead, sir.
Since no one has a question, I have one. How many here are veterans? Raise your hand. That's quite a few. I'm going to make a suggestion for you if you don't mind. When I came home, it took me 15 years to talk about what I had seen and done until my boys got old enough to ask questions. So my suggestion to you is this. Everything that you've seen and done, talk about it. Write it down if you don't want to talk about it. Have somebody type it up for you if you can't type yourself, and let your family know what you've been through, because this is history for your family. And you would be surprised after doing all of this how much ease and how much better you're going to feel about it, because you've been able to divulge things that you probably couldn't do before. So write it down, give copies to all your family. It's your history, and be proud of it.
Hooah.